Hey everybody, it's Dominic Rubino here, Cabinet Maker Profit System. How are you? Today I'm going to be talking about numbers on the calendar, which is kind of an interesting topic if you think about it, because the title doesn't make any sense on its own, does it? But I just want to talk to you about a system that's easy to put in place, really easy to put in place, but that a lot of people avoid because they don't like numbers. I'm the first one to say I don't really like numbers either. But I learned a way to get around that, especially in business. And as you know, I've had a couple of companies of my own. And the way to get around it is looking for patterns in the numbers. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. For those of you who are listening to this as an audio, it's also a video, which you can see on YouTube. And for those of you watching it on YouTube, especially those of you that are in Australia or New Zealand, you're going to be a little upset with me because I'm wearing my Wallabies shirt, I just noticed. And it's from Adelaide, Australia. So the Wallabies are a very specific team in Adelaide, Australia. So if you're not a Wallabies fan, you're going to be offended at my shirt, but I'm still wearing it. For those of you listening on the podcast who have no idea what I'm talking about, go check out the Cabinet Maker Profit System YouTube page. You can actually see all the different podcast episodes are all recorded on video there. The reason I do that, by the way, is so that you can watch them or listen to them at your desk while you're working, and you don't have to necessarily download the podcast onto your phone and play it later while you're at your desk. You can always have it playing in the background if you like while you're at your desk working on other things. Anyways, so that's why I'm wearing the Wallaby shirt. So listen, today we're going to talk about numbers on the calendar. Numbers on the calendar is important, and let me tell you why it's important from my perspective, which is, as you guys know, the perspective of a business coach, right? And I'm a business owner just like you have been many, many times over. I'm either proud or bruised to say that I've started a whole bunch of companies. I've started, built, and sold two rather large companies. Both of the two that I'm talking about were multi-country and they're big numbers. One of them had a team of 140, and the other one had a team of 237. So you can kind of do the math on your own. They're big companies. But listen, I didn't do it through anything except the same thing that you do all day, which is work really hard and try to stay focused on the important things. But one thing that I did do differently to get those two companies to grow so well that I didn't do in the past, because I've had some companies that didn't do well in my past, is that I really focused on the numbers. Now, the numbers can seem boring, and it can be confusing, especially if you start chasing every number out there, every number in the book, I guess would be the way to say it. But if you start to look for patterns in the right numbers, the patterns tell you a lot. So let me start this off with a funny story. Nothing to do with cabinet making, nothing to do with countertops, nothing to do with construction trades at all. It has to do with business. And I like to tell people that I am in the business of business, because as a business coach, that's really what I'm in, the business of business. So this example is going to come from one of my own companies many years ago, nothing to do with trades, nothing to do with making things out of wood, and a weird one at that. So you're going to maybe you can get a giggle out of this. So looking at the numbers and looking at the patterns, this is one of my old companies, and this old company of mine was a mail order pharmacy. So people would contact us by phone or by email, and we would fulfill their pharmaceutical order and then ship to them, right? And so in that, I had a call center. I had 120 people in the call center, and I have a call center background because my way into business and into entrepreneurship was that I was a salesperson for a telecom company, and I started selling to call centers and companies that used lots of their phone, right? They just were out there making lots of calls. And so over the years, I just kind of morphed and became a manager in that, and then got into business, which really I was always set up to do. I'm a horrible employee, probably the worst. I suck. But the reason I suck is because I'm more like the owner than anybody else. I'm just not a good employee. I'd rather be a leader. I'm okay to take the arrows in my back. I'm okay to put the vision on the board and have everybody giggle and say, oh, how are we going to get there? That seems dumb. That's a stretch. We can't do it because this is broken. That doesn't work. Sure, all those things exist. Absolutely. And let's go fix that, right? So anyways, running this call center, I had my assistant print off a report. You can do the same thing. You're going to want to change the words of this. But the report I had my assistant print, as I said, here's our top categories of the things we sell. Go please print me a report of the top buyers. Who are the people that are buying the most in those categories? And so one of the categories was pet medications. Believe it or not, we sold lots of pet medications. I was running a registered pharmacy. By the way, I'm not a pharmacist. I am an entrepreneur though, so I figured out how to start a pharmacy without being a pharmacist. One of the categories was pet medications. There were other categories, people who took diabetic medications, people who took heart pills, people who were on different types of hormone therapy. And then another category was birth control medications, because it's another category unto itself, right? We had a smoking cessation category, people that were buying the patch and things like that. So I had all these reports on my desk, and I guess it was around lunchtime. So my partner came in and said, hey, let's go for lunch. So yeah, we'll go for lunch. So I threw everything down on my desk and I walked out. When I came back, 2 reports were laying on my desk. I had just thrown them down, and just randomly 2 reports were laying kind of on top of each other, half a page here and half a page here, just laying on top of each other. And the 2 reports were titled this. One of them, I'll never forget this. One was pet medications, and the other report was the top buyers of our birth control category. And now you might be laughing already, but here's what I found out that I never, ever would have known, is that somebody who phoned into us and bought pet medications was also very, very likely to buy birth control. And by the same token, if somebody called in to buy birth control, they're very, very likely to buy pet medications. And the reason I knew that is because the same names showed up on that top 10 list. Who's the top 10 buyers? Who's the top 50 buyers? All those things. That's the kind of reports that I would always run to see who was our perfect client. You hear me talk about that a lot here on the podcast. And if you work with me as a coach, you're probably bleeding from the ears with me talking about who's our perfect client, what's our perfect and most ideal job. And that is the same question with different flavors exists in any industry. And so those of you who've heard me say it before are kind of laughing. Those of you who've never heard me say it before are wondering why I'm talking about it so much, but it's because it's really important. So anyways, we figured out that a woman who bought birth control medications was more likely to buy pet medications. Okay, so that's interesting. That's a pattern, right? So that's a pattern that popped out of the numbers. It's a weird pattern, but what did we do with that? Well, I had a scripting system built into the online ordering system. So that means when my call center people were taking an order and somebody called in to do pet medications, script would flash up. Now, you can imagine how delicate we had to be with the script. I couldn't say, hey, I noticed you're buying pet medications. Do you have an active social life as well? You just can't do that, right? And somebody who bought birth control meds say, well, I notice you have an active social life. Do you have a pet at home? It just doesn't jive. So we had to have a different way, different scripting that went both ways. So our simple system was that anytime somebody bought something in the category of birth control medications, we would keep them on the phone and talk about their life. Hey, where do you live? What's it like? Have you got a pet? Are you still going to school? All of those things. And then my call center agent would go back to the conversation and say, oh, you've got a cat? Oh, that's interesting. Just this week, I've taken so many orders for heartworm medication. Da, 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 da. And then the person on the phone would say, you sell heartworm medication? Why, yes, we do. And boom, we'd make another sale in heartworm. Now, that is how the numbers come to life in your business. I just want to tell you the impact of that. When I started that company, it was nothing but an Excel spreadsheet. That's all it was. It was a dream in my head and an Excel spreadsheet. When I sold that company many, many years later, we had 500,000 repeat customers. That's 500,000 repeat customers. And it was by doing dumb little things like that. So the patterns in the numbers are what tells me what to do. So I want to talk about that for our industry here. Most of us listening here, the majority are in the cabinetry finished wood trades. We've got countertop people. We've got designers on here. We also, by the way, have other tradespeople. Those of you who've listened to a couple of different episodes of the podcast know that we have other tradespeople listening. I think it's because this kind of business info just isn't out there. You can't really find it. And so people are coming to this and saying, well, if Dom's saying this about cabinetry and about architectural millwork, it must also apply to my business. And we've got lots of HVAC people and plumbers and electricians. And on here, we have lots of people in the door business and all kinds of things. So I'm interested. It's neat to me. Those are the patterns that I see. As a matter of fact, because of that, I spun off another podcast called Profit Tool Belt. If you're interested to go check that one out. But anyways, for all of you listening here, here's what I'd like you to do. If you think this is something you want to get into, is finding the patterns in your business. And the situation that you're in is, I don't know, right? I don't know your situation. I don't know your bookkeeper, and I don't know your accountant. And you might even be doing it yourself, which is fine. might be a family member, it might be an employee, it might be part-time, might be a contractor. Either way, this position, your bookkeeper, your accountant, maybe even your administrator, is critical. But what I want you to do to find these patterns in the numbers so that you can get the bump in your business, and I'll give you a story here in a few minutes about exactly in the cabinetry trade, how I've seen this play out in other places. Find a way to work closer with that person than ever before. Now, I will stop here. If you already have a little bit of friction with the bookkeeper or the accountant in your company, then you're going to need to find a way to work closer with them or change them out. I can only tell you what you need to hear. That's the situation. That bookkeeper is the key to the financial freedom that you're looking for running a business. So if you want to make more money, if you want to have more profits, or as you guys have heard me say, if you want to drive a newer truck, towing a nicer boat to a prettier lake with a bigger cottage, this bookkeeper, financial person is an absolutely critical part of keeping the company running. So here's what I want you to do. You've got that bookkeeper thing, that accountant solved, or some sort of plan. If you don't, you need to put a plan in place for that. Just call it a spade a spade. That's what it is. But the next thing I want you to do is create a weekly recurring meeting schedule. So that means every Wednesday at 1 or every Tuesday at 2, whatever time you pick, every single week, I want you to have a standing meeting with your financial person. And that's a meeting where the two of you go into a locked room, you sit down at a clean and empty table or desk, and you have a financial meeting. It should really be weekly, especially in our industry, because things are changing so fast. We're doing jobs, we're picking up change orders, we're starting new orders, we're having to make orders for product. Credit lines are always being nudged, and we really need to know that on a weekly basis. If you can't do it weekly, do it every 2 weeks for sure. It's way too slow. Take it out of your head to do this monthly. Not going to work. It needs to be every week. And my fallback position, I will say go every 2 weeks, but that's the most, because you just have to stay on top of this so much. Anyways, in this meeting, all you're going to review is your accounting, your budgets, and your forecasts. Now, do you have to be a forecasting expert? Do you have to be a budgets expert? No. You just have to be good at looking for patterns. Patterns is how you know that somebody else sat in your car and moved your seat. You don't know exactly where your seat is set, but when you sit down, it doesn't feel right. There's something wrong. That's because your body recognizes the pattern of how you sit and how you look in the rearview mirror and everything. And when let's say somebody borrows your car and they move the steering wheel and they move the chair and they move the mirror, and you're like, oh, this is wrong. It's because you've recognized a pattern. It's the same thing as when you pull up to your house and, hey, something's wrong. I can't tell on my front lawn what's wrong, until you go look at it really closely and you realize, hey, the neighbor's dog came over and dug through the plants in the front and there's dirt all over the place, but you don't know every single square inch of your lawn and what it looks like. You just know that the pattern's different because now there's dirt piled up in your lawn and one of your plants is falling over, right? And then you can go back and find out the information you need to find out. So that's the patterns we're looking for here. All you got to look for is patterns. You don't need to know. You don't have to be a numbers expert. Your bank is saying that your DSR, your debt service ratio, has got to be this, blah, blah, blah. Those are important to the bank. You're looking for patterns that'll tell you how to get your debt service ratio where you want it to be. Okay, so the impact. When I learned how to business coach, I had to learn how to deal with finances and numbers. And in the world of a business coach, what I do is I just look for those patterns too. So your financial person is there to explain the patterns. That makes it so much simpler. They can explain the patterns. They know those things. And I've done this. When I say this, it's not a stretch. I've done this with thousands of companies around the world. I've been a business coach for something like 19 years now. I've worked with hundreds on my own. The people who I've trained to be a business coach, another company of mine, they've gone out and they've done this as well. And then people who listen to the podcast. So I've impacted thousands of people with this message. There are patterns you have to look for. So here's what I want you to do. Look at your calendar for the week and build a recurring meeting plan with your financial person. Tuesdays at 2 or Wednesdays at 1. I don't care what it is. Go to your Outlook calendar, go to your Gmail calendar, make that appointment in there. Let's say Tuesday at 2 o'clock. So Tuesday from 2 till 3. And then invite your financial person. Her name is Betty Rubble. So Betty Rubble at myco.com. Just invite her and set that meeting for every week and never ending. And so it'll just keep popping up. And Betty will show up in front of your door and say, hey, boss, you ready for our meeting? You go, yeah. And once you set those numbers, once you set your expectations, you'll know when the pattern is broken, and then you know what to go and fix. It's super simple. Let me give you an example that I see very often in cabinetry, millwork, kitchen cabinets, even furniture. We're going to use an example here of a company that does residential and commercial deals. The company I'm thinking of here does about $3 million a year. But what they weren't doing is they didn't know, they wanted to know, but they didn't know which jobs were most profitable. All these guys know is how to work hard. The answer to everything for these guys is, well, Don, we just put our nose to the grindstone. We just buckle down and we work hard. We'll make it happen. We'll do anything the customer wants. We're very creative. All those things are great, right? Greatest guys in the world, but they know how to work hard. My job is not to be smarter, but I want to show you how to work smarter, because there are ways to work smarter. So here's the example in the numbers, right? So they said, look, we work hard on every deal. We treat every deal the same, but they did do commercial jobs and they did do residential jobs. So the question becomes, at least my question that I have to raise is, well, which one of those two types of jobs is most profitable for you? So here's what we did. We put a system in place where after every job was done, the owners got together and did a job-by-job review. So after the Smith job is done, these guys had a preset meeting every week. Let's say Wednesdays at 1. They would say, well, if a job ended last week, then the next Wednesday at 1, we would do a review of the profitability of that job. And here's the headings that we looked at. It's pretty simple. We're looking for patterns. Remember, it's pretty simple. What was the estimated cost? What was our production time in days? What was our profit in dollars? And what was our profit as a percentage? Very simple. Of course, the conversation led to other things, how many change orders. There's some interesting things we can do with change orders that I can talk about in other episodes. But that was all we tracked. That was it. That's the meeting. What did we estimate it for? What was the production time in days to get that done? What was the profit in dollars? And what was the profit percentage? And when you do one job, the Smith job, and you see it in front of you, you're like, I can imagine what my clients say. They look at it, and then they look across the table at me or over the webinar with me and say, well, Dom, you haven't really changed the world much. Thank you for that info. But it's kind of like when you read, the comics that are in the newspaper. If you read one Far Side cartoon, you kind of snicker. You smile a little bit. If you read one Calvin and Hobbes, you smile a little bit. But when you get the whole Calvin and Hobbes book and you start to look at one comic after the next comic, by the time you're in 5 pages, you're laughing out loud. You can't control yourself. And it's almost impossible to explain to anybody else why you're laughing about this Far Side comic or a Dilbert or whatever it is, right? It's the same thing with these reports. You look at one and you're like, that's pretty good info. You look at 2 side by side and you're like, You look at 10 of them side by side and guess what you start to see? How many of you have already said this out loud? You start to see patterns. You start to see patterns. This particular company, $3 million company, the way their shop was laid out, the way their guys were trained and the kind of jobs they did and the area that they worked in, it looked like the pattern was really, really clear. That commercial jobs, they were bigger. They were sexier. They had a lot more oomph to them. You could say we did such and such law firm, and we renovated that part of the hospital, and we did a little job here at the museum. We did this over here at the courthouse. Those sound cool, and they're good to talk about at parties or at the barbecue. But where were they making more money? Residential deals. They made more as a percentage and more as a dollar value on residential deals. And interestingly, when we looked at their production time in days, their profit per day, per shop day, was higher on residential deals as well. The problem with residential deals is they're not 110, 150, $250,000 at a time. And so that's why these guys were balancing between we do some residential and we do some commercial. But at least we have the info. And now, intelligently, we can start to understand where we need to go to get more deals for more profit, because we are in business to make a profit. And so what happens is, when crunch time comes and you've got 2 estimates that come in on a Thursday afternoon, one of them is a commercial deal and one of them is a residential deal. And the most important thing to us is the value of our production day and the profit per job. We're going to estimate that residential job first. We're not going to ignore the commercial one. We're just going to put the most effort and the first effort into the residential job. Okay, so we're looking for patterns. I could keep going, but I think you pretty much get the message here. Today's all about looking for patterns in the numbers. So let me recap what I'd like you to do, though. I want you to set a recurring meeting with your financial person. If you don't have a strong relationship with your financial person, my friend, coaching session number 1, go get that fixed. That's got to be strong. That's your right hand. That's the crutch you need to lean on. financial person is critical. If it's you and you're finding you're too busy, go hire somebody else to do that. There are lots of people who can do that. If it's somebody else in your company, maybe it's a situation where you can't get rid of them because it's a family member. I've never heard that before. Give me a shout. Call me. Send me a text message. I'm super easy to find. We can have a confidential conversation about some things other people have done, and maybe that'll help. But either way, get that financial person set aside, okay? Then create a regular weekly meeting with that person, okay? It's just you and that person one-on-one in an outside room, locked door, clean table. All you're talking about is finances. Then you want to get them to explain the patterns to you. You want to start to look for patterns, and then you want to just start to ask the kind of intelligent questions you're gleaning from listening to my podcast. If you're listening to this one, you're listening to other ones as well. They're telling you really good questions to watch for and to listen for and to ask. Start to ask just basic questions about the company, and the patterns will emerge. Thanks so much for listening. This is Cabinet Maker Profit System. I'm really proud that you listen. Thank you so much for taking the time. The listenership is going through the roof. I couldn't be happier because I know I'm impacting people in a positive way, and that's all I want to do. All right, folks, have a great day, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.